Welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a submission from the Storybox, which is a transcript that goes very aggressively after Candace Owens' recent claims about the Epstein files, historical revisionism, and anti-Semitism.
Right. This one is fascinating because the stakes are, they're incredibly high. The author is tackling some really serious accusations. We're talking Nazi-level propaganda, the distortion of history.
Yeah.
But the execution of that critique is, it's where things get messy.
That's the tension I felt right away. You've got this core of, very serious factual grievance, but it's all wrapped up in a delivery that I think undermines the very point the author is trying to make.
It really does.
And the biggest hurdle right out of the gate is the question of ethos. The effectiveness of a serious political critique is so dependent on maintaining a level of seriousness that, surpasses the subject you're criticizing.
It's the dingbat problem.
It really is. Yet throughout the text, the author resorts to these, playground, calling her Candy Stinking Owens, a dingbat, and then, kind of bizarrely, he calls himself Ding Batman, who's there to save her.
It stops you dead in your tracks. And we have to talk about why this destroys the argument. Because it's not just, be more polite. It's a tactical error.
Yes.
When you're accusing someone of something as grave as this, you're positioning yourself as the voice of reason. You're the adult in the room.
Right.
And the moment you say Candace Stinkin' Owens, you're not the adult anymore. You're just another kid throwing sand in the sandbox.
It creates this massive tonal dissonance. You're reading about the safety of Jewish communities, a life-or-death topic, and then
all of a sudden you're in a skit about a superhero named Ding Batman. It lowers the status of the critic.
Exactly. It's a status drop?
It is. If you want to dismantle a demagogue, you have to stand above them, not get down in the mud with them. By using her tactics, the name calling, the author is kind of implicitly saying, I'm on the same level as Candace Owens.
Which is the last thing you want to communicate.
The very last thing.
And it also risks alienating the people who actually need to hear this. Think about the persuadable audience member. They might be clicking on this because they're confused by what Owens is saying.
They want clarity.
They want clarity on the Epstein files. But if the first thing they hear is Candy Stinking Owens, they don't hear a fact checker. They just hear a hater.
They hear bias. They hear emotional dysregulation. And they click off. And the validity of the counter-argument, and the author does have valid points here, it all gets washed away by the immaturity.
So the fix here isn't just be nice, it's to be clinical.
Be clinical, exactly. We need to strip away every single one of these ad hominem attacks so the severity of Owens' actual statements can just shine through. Let the contrast do the work.
You want the listener to be shocked by what she said, not distracted by what you said about her.
Right.
So let's workshop an example. There's a line that says, Candy Stinking Owens, who believes that we're all run by satanic PDF file.
It's almost funny, but it's weak. A stronger version would just be something like, Owens has pivoted to the conspiracy that global leadership consists of satanic predators. You keep the substance of her claim, which is the absurd part, but you remove your own emotional baggage. When you state her claim with dry clinical precision, it sounds insane.
Yeah, you don't need to add anything to it.
Nothing.
And we absolutely have to cut the Ding Batman persona. The author writes about trying to save her like he's this tragic hero.
Needs to go. All of it. It's a barrier to the truth. Replace that theatrical stuff with cold analysis. Instead of I'm Ding Batman trying to save her, say something like, the rhetoric employed here creates a closed narrative loop that's immune to correction.
Right. You shift from being a character in her story to being an analyst dissecting her story.
That's the move.
And there's one more example of this that really stood out. The clapping dingbat monkeys at the Grammy.
Oh yeah, insulting the audience is never a winning strategy. It just frames the author as hostile. Instead, just describe them as an uncritically supportive crowd.
Or an audience unaware of the contradictions?
Yeah. You want to sound like an observer studying a phenomenon, not some guy yelling at his TV.
And this issue of focus, it actually bleeds right into the structure of the piece, especially the beginning. A compelling argument, it needs to be relevant right from the start to keep the audience.
Yeah, this piece suffers from a really disjointed opening. It delays the main argument way too long.
It's the jelly roll confusion.
It is. I honestly thought I had opened the wrong document. The title says Candace Owens, Epstein, but the text starts with this long rant about Billie Eilish, a $35 million mansion, land acknowledgments, and then a country singer named Jelly Roll.
I see what the author's trying to do, connect the dots on hypocrisy.
I get it too, but to a listener tuning in for a specific political critique, it's just noise. It's static. You have no idea how it connects to the main topic until minutes in.
It acts as a massive filter, and not a good one. It filters out anyone who isn't already deep inside the author's specific train of thought. I mean, 5 minutes in, and I still don't know why we're talking about Jelly Roll.
You're fatigued before the main argument even starts, and it dilutes the impact. Later in the script, the author drops this bombshell about Nazi-level propaganda.
Which is a huge claim.
A huge claim, but because we spent the first 4 minutes meandering through Hollywood real estate, the urgency is just gone.
So the suggestion is, what, cut the cold open entirely?
I would take a machete to that first page. Seriously. Look at the transition that happens later in the text. Candace Owens is now diving into the Epstein files, but ignoring the mention of God 22,000 times in favor of anti-Jewish rhetoric.
That's your opener.
That is your opener. That's the hook. It's punchy. It tells me the subject, the conflict, the specific angle we're exploring. Start there.
And what about the Jelly Roll stuff, if the author feels it's essential?
Then move it. If you're trying to contrast how media treats Christians versus secular stars, fine, but put it where it belongs. Move it into the middle section when you're talking about virtue signaling. Use it as a supporting example, not the front door.
So that tightens up the structure, but then we have to look at the argument itself. The author's tackling historical revisionism, these claims about Ulysses S. Grant, Sigmund Freud, but the rebuttal is almost entirely theological.
This is the weakest link in the whole chain of logic. The author clearly knows Owens is lying about history, but his instinct is to fight those lies with religious indignation. We see quote after quote from Exodus, warnings about God's wrath.
Which is, a valid personal worldview.
It is, of course. But in the context of debunking historical lies, it's a sermon, not an argument. If Owens says, history proves X, and you reply, God will punish you, you haven't actually corrected the history.
You're bringing a Bible verse to a data fight.
Exactly. And it feels like such a missed opportunity to actually educate the audience. For example, Owens claims Ulysses S. Grant was anti-Semitic. She cites his interactions with B'nai B'rith. The author just dismisses this as her cooking up things.
And cooking up isn't a rebuttal.
It's not a rebuttal. The author needs to give the audience the facts. This is where you fight fire with water. Briefly explain the context of General Order Number 11.
Right.
Acknowledge that, yes, Grant issued an expulsion order, but then explain that it was condemned by Lincoln. It was rescinded almost immediately, and that Grant spent the rest of his life apologizing for it.
That destroys her narrative. It shows nuance.
It shows that history is messy, whereas conspiracy theories are simple. If you just scream liar or sinner, you leave the conspiracy intact. You have to actually dismantle it, brick by brick.
The same thing happens with the Sigmund Freud section. Owens claims he ate skin and was part of a devil religion. The author just calls it wild.
Wild is a reaction, not a critique. Spent 2 sentences citing the consensus on Freud, explain that his theories were secular attempts to understand the unconscious. If there's some weird claim about eating skin, explain that it's likely a distortion of a patient's delusion, not Freud's diet. You have to explain why it's a lie.
And then there's the author's conclusion about Owens herself. I'm sure Candace is going to continue this, because she's a nut job.
Ugh, I hate the nut job label. It's lazy, and honestly, it lets her off the hook. If she's just crazy, she's not responsible. A much more damning critique is to frame her as calculated.
So instead of she's a nut job, you'd say something like,
You'd say, she creates a false dialectic by misusing historical footnotes, as seen in her distortion of the Khazar narrative. We can expect her to apply the same deceptive template to future topics.
that frames her as a manipulator, not a maniac.
Much more powerful. It's a critique that actually sticks.
Okay, let's talk about pacing, the actual words on the page. We've covered the big structural issues, but the line-by-line writing has a lot of throat clearing, you know? Eliminating that stuff creates a more urgent narrative.
Oh, the meta-commentary. It's everywhere. I want to make mention of, I don't know if you guys have noticed, let me know if you'd like to, spoiler alert.
It feels like the author is revving the engine but has the car in neutral.
It's insecurity, I think. It's the writer buying time while they think of the next point. But for the listener, it's agonizing. We don't need to know the mechanics of your thought process. Just give us the thought.
There's a section where he talks about his Twitter account. I said this over on my Twitter or my X account, JFM if you haven't already. I post pretty much all the things.
Cut it, burn it. It just kills the momentum completely. Suddenly we're not talking about anti-Semitism or history. We're doing a commercial for a social media profile.
So how do you fix that if the point he made on Twitter is actually relevant?
You just make the point. Just say, As I've noted previously, many legitimate criticisms of Israel are being co-opted by actual anti-Semitism. Boom.
You're in the argument.
You're in the argument. No plug, no platform confusion. The authority comes from the statement itself, not from the fact that you tweeted it.
The other pacing killer is what I'd call the loop. The author circles back to the idea of being paid to bash Jews versus paid to defend Jews 3 or 4 times.
It's the repetitive loop of someone who's angry but hasn't fully organized their anger into a linear argument. Say it once, make it definitive, and then move on. When you repeat it, it almost sounds like you're trying to convince yourself.
And there's also this very long, kind of awkward section inviting pastors to a debate. I extend it to you again. You should be able to embarrass me. It feels a bit
pleading. It sounds like a voicemail you leave an ex at 2 in the morning. It just shifts the power dynamic in the wrong direction. It makes the author sound a little desperate for attention.
How do we turn that into a power move then?
You condense it. You turn it into an observation. So instead of begging for a debate, you simply state, Owens issues challenges to debate, yet consistently avoids engaging with experts who could actually dismantle her revisionist history.
That's strong. It turns a plea into an indictment of her cowardice.
Exactly. It stops the author from looking like they're chasing clout and positions them as the one holding the standard of truth.
So if we zoom out and look at the whole picture, we're really trying to help the listener move this piece from a rant into a proper rebuttal.
That is the core distinction. Yeah, a rant is for the writer. A rebuttal is for the audience. Right now, this script is a rant. It feels good to write, it feels good to say dingbat and nutjob, but it doesn't change minds.
To make it a rebuttal, we have 4 clear steps. First, the ethos upgrade.
Drop the juvenile insults. No more dingbatting. Just be the adult in the room.
Second, the structural fix.
Cut the cold open. No Billie Eilish, no Jelly Roll. Start with the core conflict, Owens and the Epstein files.
Third, what we called the evidence swap.
Right. Replace the sermons with citations. Don't threaten her with God. Correct her with history. Use the facts about Grant and Freud to expose the lie.
And finally, the rhetorical polish.
Cut the fillers, stop the loops, and please stop plugging your Twitter. Just trust that your argument is interesting enough on its own.
It feels like a lot of change, but the core, the passion, the factual correctness of his points, it's all there. It just needs to be, excavated.
Absolutely. The raw material is right. The author clearly sees the danger in what Owens is doing. We just want to make sure that the critique is as serious and as effective as the subject matter demands.
Yeah, you want a piece you can send to a skeptic and say, listen to this, without having to apologize for the name-calling in the first 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Well, we would love to see how this evolves. I genuinely hope the listener takes another pass at this, because the argument really deserves to be heard clearly. Please do submit the revised script for a follow-up critique once you've had a chance to make some edits.
I'd love to read that version.
Thanks for listening to The Critique.